everyone. Thank you for being with us today with our full house. So thank you for bearing with us, those standing in the back. So welcome. We want to welcome you to Let's Give Them Something to Talk About. Motivational interviewing techniques and strategies for a better CANS. So I am Lynn Matsey. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and a certified case manager, and I work with the PATH team, which stands for Provider Assistance Training Hub with the University of Illinois, Urbana, Champaign School of Social Work. And in that role, I work as a field specialist where we go out and teach how to do the CANS, whereas I am CANS for us in Illinois, but the CANS, and we also get people prepared for the examination. So the workshop we will be providing you today is sponsored by the Illinois Department of Healthcare and Family Services. It's going to be administered again by our PATH team. And all the materials that you'll see related to TCOM or the CANS are provided in collaboration with the John Praed Foundation. We do not have any disclosures, so we can skip that. These are our learning objectives for our workshop today. Our first one is we want to make sure to define motivational interviewing and identify how it can be used to engage individuals to share in a more conversational style when you're doing those assessments. Also, we want to identify motivational interviewing techniques that are useful in completing the CANS or other assessment tools. By a show of hands, how many of you here actually conduct a CANS with an individual? Okay, all right, so pretty much a lot of you. Also, our third learning objective, we want to make sure you get practice, so we're going to make this engaging and hopefully fun, using those motivational interviewing strategies that elicit that empathy. And then finally, we want to identify those barriers to rapport building that may impact access to those needs and strengths as you're doing that assessment. So we don't want to have a roadblock or barrier.
All right, so we're going to jump right in then, and we're going to start talking about what motivational interviewing is. We only have an hour and 2 hours worth of information we really want to give you, but that's okay. First of all, I am a member of the Motivational Interviewing Network of Trainers. So we attend something very similar to like this annually. It's an international organization. And so the two people who sort of are the creators, per se, of motivational interviewing are Bill Miller and Steve Rolnick. And they, just like John Lyons walking around here, they are the gurus walking around at the Mint conferences. So they have written this particular manual, per se, of motivational interviewing. And this is how they define it. We're just going to start with that, and we're going to build on it. So motivational interviewing is a collaborative, goal-oriented style of communication. Sounds familiar, right? Like that's what we've been talking about. And it pays particular attention to the change language, the language of change. And that's a little bit different in motivational interviewing than what we focus on in TCOM, but there's some real benefits to doing that, and we'll talk a little bit more about it. It's designed to strengthen personal motivation for and the commitment to a specific goal, which is what we're doing too, right? We use those collaborative efforts to learn what it is that an individual would like to work toward and how they can work toward it. And so this is done by eliciting and exploring the person's own reasons for change within an atmosphere of acceptance and compassion. What would be your one word that you would say would describe motivational interviewing? Engagement, 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 collaboration, collaborative, love it. Supportive, that's awesome, it's so important. And transformational too, right? We really focus on that in TCOM, and motivational interviewing actually doesn't pay as much attention to that particular language of transformation, but ultimately that is the definition for them too. It's just not really targeted as specifically as we do in TCOM. You're right on. You're exactly right where we want to be. And this is the language, this is the definition of motivational interviewing that we're also so very familiar with from a TCOM perspective. And so we're just going to talk about some of the techniques that we explore in motivational interviewing and how they apply or even are so much the same with TCOM. You're going to click. There we go. So I'm going to break this down a little bit further. This comes straight from the definition, and you pointed out some of these pieces so very well in that word cloud. The person-centered approach, right? So in motivational interviewing, as well as TCOM, we are really targeting that person-centered approach. So we're there to support and guide individuals with whom we work, and not direct them, not push them, not attempt to put any plan or words in their mouth. So we're listening to them, we're hearing their story, and asking them, how can we get to that shared vision? How can we get to that big picture at the end? I mentioned this already, but in motivational interviewing, we are very focused on the guiding process. So we do attempt to stay on task, which is always a change-oriented focus in motivational interviewing, and we do this by guiding individuals. So we allow them to sort of go off in the directions that they need, and in TCOM, that's where we learn their needs, right? That's how we learn to understand what is significant to them, what's important in their life. But then ultimately, we're in motivational interviewing, we really focus on bringing them back to that strengths-based, that positive emphasis on how can the change really happen and what's it going to look like. And then here's a really cool piece of, this is one of my favorite concepts in motivational interviewing. It's the idea of ambivalence. So anybody willing to throw out what ambivalence is in simple language? I know it's on the board. So in motivational interviewing, we ultimately know that an individual must be on the fence before they ever make change, right? Years and years ago, when motivational interviewing was just a concept, there was a real emphasis on if somebody walked in and said, I can't stop drinking, I've been doing it for 20 years, the idea was that they had no motivation, they don't really want to change. But have you ever made change in your life where you didn't first say, I'm not really sure if I can do that, right? You have to have that awareness. You have to be able to say, you know why I eat chocolate? Because I love it, it's good, it makes me feel good, it makes me happy. You know why I don't? Why I shouldn't eat chocolate? Because I regret it later, and because, all these other little pieces too. But I have to have both sides. And I go through those often when I'm contemplating the chocolate, right? Like I sit there all the time and I'm like, I know how I'm gonna feel later. But you have to have that. You have to be on the fence at some point before you can move to the other side. And so working with individuals in motivational interviewing and TCOM, we really have to ask them what that other side of the fence looks like or why it exists, right? And so in MI, that's called change language. If I have an individual in front of me who's saying, I have to stop drinking because my wife is about ready to kick me out of the house, that's a reason to quit. That's change language. And we want to target that. And we want to spend time talking about that. Okay, so now I understand why. Let's talk about how that's going to happen. What does that look like? And we build that story. We build that side of the fence so that we are starting to develop that plan right from the beginning. And that's part of the engagement. It starts the minute they sit down.
As we are preparing to do our motivational interview, we definitely have to pay attention to building that engagement, right? That's one of the most important pieces to being able to really get that effective interview. So part of building that engagement is enhancing that empathy or making sure that you are projecting that empathy to the individual that you're talking to, because you want them to feel like you understand where they're coming from, right? So these are some ways that we can enhance empathy. So first and foremost, you want to give 100% attention. So I know it can be difficult. Probably in the time that Lori and I have been speaking, your mind might have trailed off already. Right. So we want to make sure that we try to minimize those distractions and pay attention to what that individual is saying, because they're really sharing their stories with us. So we want to give them that space and that attention. We also can hone those observational skills. So there are so much communication in body language, right? So we're learning a lot about a person just from observing them and how they're moving, how their hands are moving. We can tell if they're scared, if they're maybe shameful, if they're embarrassed in the moment. So we can take in all of that to be able to connect better with that individual in the moment. We also want to consider the perspective of other people. So we may come across someone that has a very different perspective than we have. Maybe we have our own ideas about how things should work, or maybe how to handle an issue that they're dealing with. But we don't need to be there to tell them what to do. We just want to be open to hear their perspective and hear the perspective of someone else and try to be in their shoes. So there's a saying that goes, before you can criticize someone, walk a mile in their shoes. I don't know if you've heard that before. So that's what we want to do, be open to their perspective. We want to also use what, how, and why method. So the what, how, and why method is a tool. It's a tool to help us gain a deeper understanding of where a person is coming from, okay? So when we're looking at the what, we're looking at what is happening. So we want to ask that individual, what's going on? What's happening in your life? We're getting information, right? We also want to find out, how is this situation that you're going through impacting you? How is it impacting you emotionally? So we can take that information of what's happening, how it's impacting you, and then figure out, why is this individual having this issue in the first place? You know, it helps us to then take that information and then interpret it at another level so that we can start to begin to figure out what can we do to help that transformational change happen. Of course, always collaborating and being person-centered. We finally want to focus on understanding the feelings of others. So we always don't want to, be focused on our own opinions, our own thoughts, our own backgrounds. We want to be focused on, what is that individual I'm talking to feeling in the moment, so we can connect, so we can have that empathy. So all of these things help to enhance that. So now we're going to dip into, what are some of those techniques that we can utilize for motivational interviewing. And we're going to share with you the OARS acronym, okay? So these are some tips and techniques for motivational interviewing. So as we know, OARS, probably in our English dictionary, is just paddles for a boat, right? We use the paddles for the boat to direct the boat where we want it to go, right? To move that boat in this direction or that direction. So when we're looking at our OARS, this is also a metaphor that we're trying to use these techniques to move that conversation along. We want to move it along in a direction to be able to get more information about that individual and to further connect with them. So our O is going to stand for open questions. Our A is affirmations. R is going to be reflections. And then S is going to be summaries. Okay, and we're going to go in a little more detail about that. So starting with our open questions. So as we know, if we ask a closed-ended question, what happens? Somebody tell me what happens. Exactly. It's going to significantly limit your responses. And are you then able to get a lot of information from that individual? No. So when we're conducting that assessment, we want to try to use those open questions so we can provoke more answers, more information, evoke more information from that individual, instead of limit those answers to that yes, no, good, bad, etc. And when we're using open questions, you want to start with, typically what, how, can you describe for me? Can you tell me more about that? That really opens up the space for that individual to share. Instead of using the typical closed questions, can you, do you, have you, should you? You're going to end up with those yes, no, good, bad answers when you open it up in those ways. And you want to, of course, evoke more conversation. Now, in some instances, closed questions may be appropriate. If you're just trying to find out, where were you last night? Let's say at the gym. You may want those short questions, but usually when you're just gathering information. But for our purposes with the assessment, when you're using that CANS, you want to open up that space to get more information, to be able to identify those needs and those strengths that that individual has and they're dealing with, okay? So this is a beware, okay? Beware of the question answer trap. So if you tend to use a lot of closed questions with an individual, it may end up sounding like an interrogation, right? So we're going back and forth. Has anybody had an experience where they have gotten into that question answer trap? Maybe they're working with an individual who is not very open with information. Can somebody share maybe an incident where they might have, had that instance?
One of the situations that I got into was asking someone, so from a coaching perspective, we do a lot of coaching. And so we're always trying to unpeel the onion And so when you start asking a question of something like, it may start off as an open question of tell me how you feel, right? And so then they tell you how they feel. And then you want to ask the next question of, okay, because they're real short and telling you how they feel. And so then you want to ask the next question of what does that look like, right? So when you start unpeeling the layers, sometimes you get into that trap of it sounds like you're just interviewing them and it turns into yes, no, even though your intention is very much open, but how you're having to continue to ask the next question because they're very short, it comes into it sounds like or feels like an interrogation.
Absolutely. And how did that make you feel in the moment when it was turning into the interrogation?
Well, as the interviewer, it's frustrating.
Yes.
Because I'm trying to better understand the person.
Absolutely.
And they're getting frustrated because I'm asking the questions.
Yes.
And so it doesn't lend to empathy in that sense. It doesn't feel like it's empathy on the receiving end and or on the giving end. And so as you become more frustrated, then your questions become closed.
Absolutely.
Because you just want to get your job done at that point.
Right, right, exactly. Thank you for sharing that very much. And I also want to point out something else you said, that you changed the question, that you knew, I'm backing myself up into this corner. I don't want to stay here, so I'm going to change the question around. So kudos to you. And thank you for.
I just wanted to add to that because in motivational interviewing, you are exactly right on that. Even closed questions can turn into an interrogation. And so one thing that we really caution is we have like this three question rule. If you've asked 3 questions, you're now sitting in a doctor's office and you're going to get your weight next, right? Because that's how it feels. Now you're just saying what your blood pressure is and what your weight is, and you're no longer actually getting emotions. And so in motivational interviewing, we do this three question rule. So if you've asked 3 questions, and especially if you start to feel yourself moving into closed questions, it's really time to switch to reflections. And so we're going to talk about those here real soon.
So another technique we can utilize is affirmations. So affirmations are those statements that we make towards individuals with that positive regard, right? So a good affirmation would emphasize a strength and possibly a notice and appreciate a positive action. So for example, if you're working with an individual, you're talking to them and they're sharing their story, you may say, I really appreciate the way that you are telling me about what's going on. I really like how you are able to explain to me in detail what's happening. So if somebody says that to me, that's going to encourage me to keep going, right? I'm going to be like, okay, well, I'm doing what I should be doing here, so I'm going to keep going. So that helps us to, continue that conversation and move it along. We also want to make sure any affirmations are genuine. You don't want to sound like you're being fake, phony, or condescending in any way. You should express positive regard and caring. And affirmations should be used to strengthen that therapeutic relationship. And you do not want to overuse them. So like I said before, you want to make sure it's genuine. If you start to use affirmation after affirmation after affirmation, it may start to feel like you're being a little bit not genuine, right, in the moment, and just trying to kind of pump the person up, and you don't really know them. So you have to be careful about using affirmations when you're just getting to know someone, but they can be a great, positive, motivational interviewing tool.
I was going to add, though, that with affirmations, we also still have that three complement rule. So, you've all been there where somebody says to you, they're like, oh, I like your hair, oh, I like your shoes, oh, I like your clothes, and now you're just like, what do you want? Right? It's no longer authentic, it's no longer engaging, it sounds like there's an ulterior motive. So we have to be careful. Affirmations are great, they build the relationship, especially with the younger crowd, right? We know teenagers love to hear those things, but you do have to be careful because 3 is pushing the limit there. All right, we're going to move on to reflections, and we're going to talk a little bit about the 2 main types of reflections. So in motivational interviewing and probably everywhere else, we have these complex reflections and simple reflections. And so if I have an individual walk in the room and she's like, oh, my mom made me so mad this morning, a simple reflection could literally be repeating that. So what might that sound like? Anybody? Sounds like your mom made you mad this morning. Plain and simple, that is a simple reflection. A complex now is adding to it. Oh, yeah. A complex reflection is adding to it, and it is building on what they give you. So it might actually, it's very often taking a guess at to what else is going on in their life. So that same individual walking in and saying, oh, my mom made me so mad this morning, a complex reflection to that might be, you're tired of fighting with your mom every morning. Now, I have no reason to know, unless I know this individual very well, that she fights with her mother every single morning. So one or two things is going to happen, right? Either she's going to be like, yes, I'm so sick and tired of it, and every single day it's the same story, and blah, 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 and I'm going to get all kinds of information, right? And I've got this individual talking, and we're engaging. Or number two is going to happen, and I'm wrong. And this is where everybody's scared, right? Like, we're really scared that we just took that guess, and we are completely off base. But they're going to put us back on base because they're going to say, well, no, it doesn't happen every morning. Just today was ridiculous. I don't know what was going on with her. And again, I've got conversation and engagement. So it's okay to be wrong. It's okay to take that complex reflection. But again, we've got a 3-strike rule. If I attempt 3 complex reflections and I am wrong all 3 times, at some point this client's going to be like, are you even listening to me? You know, so we don't want to do that. So generally speaking, if I attempt a complex reflection and I'm off base, and I attempt another complex reflection and still off base, I'm going to go to some open questions. And I'm going to start gathering more information. Does that make sense? So reflections are so very useful because they allow the individual to feel heard. Because I am no longer asking them to give me information, I am saying this is what I'm hearing from you. And if you're right, and if you know an individual well enough, or if you're just on the same page and you've got it going, you've got reflection after reflection, there is no way they do not feel supported and comforted by you, because you're listening to them. All right, so we're gonna watch a little video here. It's really not intended to be serious. It's Everybody Loves Raymond, so it can't be. And we're just going to watch a little bit of reflection. So I'm just going to ask you to pay attention. Pay attention to his interaction with the child, even his wife. This always stands out to people. But we're going to talk about the reflections and the body language and how things change. I know they're actors, but I think they do a really good job of just demonstrating this.
This is terrible.
Oh, great!
This is Michael's giraffe. He's crying now. Why did you do this?
Cause.
Cause is not an answer.
Active listening.
Ray, that doesn't work.
It works. I just use it on the worst kids in the neighborhood.
Would you look at this? Look what she did.
Just try it. Try it.
No, Ray.
I'll do it. You want me to do it? I'll do it.
No. Do it. Okay. Allie, let's talk about what you did.
I don't want to talk.
Are you feeling angry?
Reflect back.
You're angry.
Yes.
Okay. But it's not okay to rip up toys when we're angry.
Judgmental.
You are angry because...
Because it used to be your toy.
Oh.
Yes. I don't like Michael and Jeffrey.
I see. You think that Mommy and Daddy pay too much attention to Michael and Jeffrey.
Ray, okay, I was handling this.
They get everything.
Right, and you're upset because we gave them your old giraffe.
I still liked it.
But you weren't playing with it.
But that doesn't matter, though, because it was still yours. And you're mad because we gave it to Michael without asking you, right?
Right.
Well, Mommy and Daddy made a mistake. And everybody makes mistakes, right, Mommy?
Yes.
Do you feel better now, Allie?
Yes, can I have the giraffe?
Well, it's broken, honey.
I know, I want to try to fix it for Michael.
Uh-huh. They're sweet.
Thank you, Daddy.
See what I did there?
Yeah. Can't believe it. It's pretty amazing. You did it.
Anything else need taken care of while I'm around here?
No.
What? What's the matter?
Nothing with you, obviously.
Don't go by me. I'm a natural. Don't worry, you'll get it.
Oh, look.
All right.
act so proud of yourself. Listen, if I hadn't dragged you to that stupid class, you'd still be standing there going, hey, no TV.
You're feeling inadequate because I mastered it before you.
Oh, don't give me that active listening crap. Where do you get off listening to me?
Never happened again.
What did we notice as far as reflections?
To her level. So he met her eye level to engage in
Right.
conversation.
Yes, so true. He got right down there, right? Yeah. Like he was able to pinpoint those feelings, and that's a huge skill that we can use in reflections, is to name emotions for individuals. Those who struggle may not actually know what the emotion is, or may not even know, feel comfortable saying it. We can do that for them, and that's a reflection. We can reflect behavior. We can reflect emotions. So what did we notice about her body language when he was reflecting well? When the reflections were working? Oh.
She was able to relax and open up to actually hear what his reflections were and to agree with them and give information.
Right, and she was able to then admit the struggle she was having, right? She wasn't going to say that beforehand. She was being judged, she was being criticized. These are not behaviors that are going to allow somebody to feel heard and engaged with. Okay, I'm not going to go in too terribly deep with these. I just want to demonstrate for you that there are many, many kinds of complex reflections. MI Phase 2 will talk about these, but for today, I just want you to be able to see that a simple reflection is just one reflection. It's the simple one. All the rest of these are complex reflections. And I will share with you my very favorite one. It's called a double-sided reflection. And like I said, in MI, we're listening for change language, and the opposite of that is what we call sustain language. That's the language that says, I'm going to keep this behavior going. I'm going to sustain this behavior. And so a double-sided is acknowledging the sustain language, but then talking about the change language. So I might say something like, you like to smoke marijuana because it helps you relax, but you know that your mother is about ready to kick you out of the house, right? So I acknowledged the reason to continue the behavior, but I ended on the reason not to. I ended on the change because that's my attempt to guide this individual into that conversation. Does that make sense? So that's a skill we can use to guide the conversation, and we move it into that path of making a plan, developing change, creating goals, all of those kinds of things. And we just do it with one little sentence, and then we listen. Right? Make sense? All right. We're going to do a really quick activity. In the sake of time, it has to be really fast. But normally, we would allow this activity to go for about 20 minutes and give everybody a chance to really listen to it. But I do want you to experience it, so I don't want to leave it out. And the reason why we're doing this is because what often happens when we're reflecting is we turn it into a question. And this is particularly true for American women. So in our field, that's most of us. Not everybody, but a fair amount struggle with this greatly. And what happens is that we say something like, you're mad at your mom? That was a question. That was not a reflection, that was a question. For me to make it a reflection, I have to say, you're mad at your mom. My voice has to go down, not up. Does that make sense? All right, so we're going to do a little activity. I'm going to have you get in groups of 3, 4, something along those lines. Actually, let's do 2 or 3. Let's stay small. And what you're going to do is you're going to make a statement about yourself. So I might say, something you should know about me is I am organized. And the person next to me is going to say, so you use a planner. Not, so you use a planner. They're going to say, you use a planner. And the third person sitting with you, or fourth, however many you have there, we'll just try to be organized and quick here, is going to either catch you or say, good job. And when they catch you, they're going to help you, right? And then we're just going to kind of keep that going around. You can bounce off of people, let other people throw one-liners out there. Something you should know about me is I'm friendly. And then, so you talk to everybody you meet. That's a reflection. Okay? So we're just going to spend literally 7 minutes practicing this. and seeing how it feels for you and how well you reflect or how vulnerable you are to falling into that question. All right, who's willing to share how that went? All right, back in the back. Lynn didn't make it to the gym today, so we're good.
And I got these heels on.
Get your steps in. Ours went very well. I think we all had thumbs up on our communication, and we had the proper responses.
Nice, right, good job.
And we have
Good
5
job.
people. So.
Anybody struggle with it? Let's talk about how that went for you.
I always said you have to kind of, and she would say, so you're feeling sad? And she would be like, she would train you to, okay, so it isn't where you want to go? And so we started getting in the habit, and she tricked me when she said something, and then I went there. And
Yeah, but it's right. When you really pay attention to that last word, I don't know. Well, let's get your feedback there first.
It felt hard because it felt like I was being presumptuous and in a way that was like not giving them enough room to tell me their story.
Yes, yes. This is what often comes up, is that we feel like we're attempting to put words in their mouth, right? And the opposite is true if we just remember that what we're really trying to do is demonstrate our understanding. Because it's very similar to saying, let me say what I'm hearing. Right? Like that's the same kind of thing, but we're just doing it in a more conversational, reflective manner. What were you going to say?
One of us was actually doing it right, but didn't get that she was doing it right. And then by the 3rd time, it felt right. Does that make sense?
Good, yes, 3rd time's a charm.
So it's just interesting to see that it took a minute to acknowledge, the difference, even though they were doing it correctly.
Right, right. Yes, no, that makes perfect sense.
I just felt like I was still questioning. So it still very much felt like a question to me.
Okay.
But the 3rd time, it started to feel a little bit better.
Okay, and sometimes it really is that confidence in, like we were saying back here, is that being okay with making the reflection and knowing I'm not attempting to put words in your mouth. I want to leave the space for you to correct me if I'm wrong, too.
With the reflection piece, I think it's hard because it's so easy. Anything we want to reflect on is an easy question. So in your mind, you have to think before you say those words.
Exactly.
Like she said, she's a mom. So I wanted to say, so are you patient? How? So I had to say, I said, you are patient. And then I opened a dialogue right after that because it could go either way. She could say, I'm not patient with my child, or I'm very patient now.
Right, exactly, right. So it is leaving that space open for them to talk. But it takes a while to start to feel comfortable and to be able to recognize that you are truly engaging them and not closing off the conversation, that you really are opening up the conversation and giving them that space. Does that make sense? All right, we're going to talk about summaries, short and sweet. They're long reflections, right? So you can use them to transition. You can use them to summarize your conversation that you just had. But really all a summary is more often using that first word. So here's what I heard you say. And then you give them everything that you've talked about. So that's a summary. And that's the bottom of our OARS. And those OARS are designed to keep moving the conversation. So we do need to use that summary as part of it too.
So we are going to do another activity. So this activity has to do with being able to introduce the cans. So I love seeing many of you who raise your hand and say we already work with the cans and conducting those assessments. So providers routinely introduce the cans, right? And individuals to those individuals and families. And you want that approach to be personable, and you want that approach to be engaging. You don't want that individual that you're working with to feel like, oh, here's just another assessment that I got to go through, right? So we want to start to introduce that cans in a different way, using those motivational interviewing techniques. So in this activity, you'll have about 10 minutes, and we'll see. We might have to cut it a little short, but we're trying to give you 10 minutes. We're going to break out in groups, so you want them to stay in the same groups.
Yeah, just go back to the same one. That'll be easier.
We'll stay in the same groups. And what you're going to do is introduce the cans. So one of you, should be a clinician, case manager, and one of you can be like the client or individual that you work with in your community. And you want to use some of these motivational interviewing techniques in order to introduce the cans. Okay? So are there any questions about what we're about to do for this activity?
Good?
It was hard.
I
I think we struggled to have open-ended questions when introducing the cans. Sort of, I'm laying out the facts,
right?
And it wasn't open, so we're still not 100% sure on how to turn it into an open question.
So if I can give you a little bit more to that, which would have helped you beforehand, but now you can take it with you when you leave. Another really nice technique in motivational interviewing is the asking for permission when you're going to give just basic information. So you might be able to say something like, so we're going to be utilizing this instrument. Is it okay if I share with you how it looks or how it works or how we're going to use it, like that kind of thing. And then they give you permission. So they're still empowered because they're saying, yes, give it to me. Right? And they're much more invested in listening because I'm like, you asked for this, I'm going to give it to you now, right? Like, because they're inviting it in. And so that's a motivational interviewing technique too, is to allow them to have that control of what they're receiving. Does that make sense? So that will be really helpful in just those basic bones of cans.
So we really focused not necessarily on the ins and outs of what the cans was, but more focused on that we're here to listen to them and capture what their story is, which then translates into what the cans produces for outcomes long term.
Yes, I love it. I love it. Because on that first meeting, right, we're there to do several things, but one is to engage. And if they don't find out every tiny detail about the cans today, then that's okay, as long as I know they're coming back because they have now built a relationship with me, even small. But they're coming back. We can talk about it later, too. Oh, get right to you.
Hi. I just wanted to add that one of the tricks for me to use it is to, after their story, after I've talked with them, after I'm finding out what they feel are some of the challenges, then I bring in something like, hey, the department has had trouble in the past really partnering with our families, and we have now this tool called the CANS in which we can communicate. And from your story, you told me, for example, little Johnny was having some trouble within school. So then I would ask you, do you think we need to plan around it, or do you think we just need to watch it?
Oh, so am I. Yes, you just said.
So I do it afterwards. Yeah.
Yes,
so I do it after the story, not before the story, so that I can then reflect what I heard them say that they need, and it's not me telling them what they need.
Yep, love it. I absolutely love it.
That's because the CANS is an outcome of an assessment.
Right, exactly. Exactly.
You just broke mine.
So, if you could speak into the broken microphone.
Yes, I will. I got you. So when we were doing our part, I think we were kind of going off each other how we the ways that we present it differently, because I shared with them, like in LA County, like, yeah, we have our manuals like this big of how to do things, but sometimes when I present and when I'm working with my workers to train around it, I always go out with the paper. And I know it's very overwhelming because there's like a million little dots and everything. So what I do is when I'm going out there and we're talking to my clients and I'm showing my worker how to do it, I say, give it to them physically, and then we don't go through, in the beginning, I really don't try to go through everything. No. Because I try to connect it with our child and family team meetings. And I know some, states don't do that. But then I go, let's look at this. Tell me 3 to 5. Just look at this paper. Give me 3 to 5 strengths about your child. Let's focus on those strengths. And then after we talk through those and do all that, then I go, well, let's look at this again. Give me 2 things that you want to work on. Give me just 2. And then we're going to start with those baby 2, because I know the department, we're going to want you to do everything A through Z, ... But let's focus with your family and what are those 2 items that you want to focus on. We'll do those baby steps to get you through to the big, so that we don't overwhelm you, your family, and we focus on those, what they want to do, and then go from there.
And that gives them the opportunity to maybe control. I don't want to work on I don't want to admit to sexual abuse right now, but I'm okay with admitting to the fact that I struggle with anxiety. So that gives them the freedom to guide the conversation, which is what we want to do. We want to allow them to open the doors that they're ready to open. Yeah. One more up here. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, we were talking about, I was suggesting, and actually I've done this a lot, is just really telling people, hey, you're here, and what's your story? So really tapping into the story and then saying, hey, by the way, we have this process where we really look at things. so that you can be able to see all the different areas that we can work with, and then you can have buy-in with that. Maybe you don't want to do this, or mom wants this, but that it can give you buy-in on certain things. And so then you're really not even talking about it, but you're talking about it after the fact. And it's just a way, as we talk about it, that the cans is to synthesize the information. So it really kind of works that way, where you can kind of bring it together. And I've seen a lot more buy-in, because people are like, whoa, like this is at this level, this is at that level. And then as well, too, you can have, other people who are in with the team, or the parent or the caregiver, to say, hey, this isn't really as bad as this, but you're able to ground it with their story first.
Right, exactly.
And I'm not introducing it to adults, it's actually to the child immediately. So that being the case, there's a level of rapport building that has to take place immediately. They don't care about the tool. They don't care about all that stuff. And actually, you'll lose them immediately. So for me, engaging them means I tell them a little bit about myself, because I find that they're interested. Like, why are you here, first of all?
Right.
And then when you tell them a little bit about yourself, then they're more apt to opening up, but also sharing with them that I'm here to talk about your strengths, but I'm also here to help you find out, what do you need? You may not even know. And that's okay too, because I've also been there. And sometimes being vulnerable as the assessor allows them to be vulnerable. You're giving them permission.
Right.
And so they then have the opportunity, it's almost like a reverse that they're able to reflect back to you. Right. Therefore, now they're more comfortable in being able to be open with you. So my situation is a little bit different, because I deal with the kids directly.
Yeah. No, but I think that's awesome, because that's very MI-like. That's empowering. Mm-hmm. If I say, this is your tool, it's not your mom's, it's not your dad's, like, it might be the family, in one entity, but ultimately it's about you. So you have the power to tell me what is important to you. So I like it. It's giving them that strength. Yeah. We have one more in the back, and then we're going to go over just some real quick roadblocks. We were going to try to throw in another game, but it's not going to happen today. But I do want to go over the roadblocks real quick, and then we'll just, if there's any additional questions, and we can hang around too.
Mine's just a real quick statement that in our state, we're using the cans as like an assessment tool to gauge progress, but they're coming to us with an initial cans. So we haven't implemented it quite yet on my team, but my expectation is that scores are going to drop. And initially, because of the MI skills and the rapport we're building with families, they're going to feel more comfortable in telling us more. So they may disclose trauma, or they may disclose things that they didn't feel comfortable with this person they didn't know at all. Right. So I'm curious to see how that goes, or how it's gone for other people, like if scores have gone down initially on the cans or what.
Sorry, I was just going to say kind of the opposite, where I've seen more, like down the road, they're opening up more, so the scores are actually higher, like they're admitting to these things that are happening, or the struggles that they're having that actually increases their score versus going down. That's my thing.
Right. That makes sense, because as you get more comfortable with someone, you're going to divulge more information than in the meeting.
And you're more aware now too, more self-aware. So the scores may fluctuate. Make it worse before it gets better.
But that's why it's an open, it's a document you can change at any time. Once you have more information, you're going to update it.
All right, so real quick, I'm just going to go over some MI barriers to that rapport building. And obviously, you're familiar with many of these already. We talk about them through the TCOM philosophy as well. But if we're ordering, directing, or commanding, obviously, and I mean, I like to think of these from a teenage perspective, because if anybody comes at a teenager ordering, directing, or, they're done, you might as well just walk out the door. So, but keep that in mind. That's true for any individual. But so just be cautious of how our language is being utilized and how it appears to them. Things like warning, threatening, obviously, even giving advice. That's why in MI we ask permission. I have some ideas. If you want me to share them with you, I will. Persuading, like we're never arguing, lecturing, obviously. And the nice thing about MI, my favorite line out of the whole MI book is that if I'm arguing, we didn't put this in here, did we?
What?
We didn't put that. No.
No.
If I'm arguing for something and you're arguing against it, I have it exactly backwards. I need the individual to be arguing for their wants, for their needs. So that's why we reflect and build their ability to tell me. Shaming, obviously. Interpreting or analyzing, like we don't really want to do that. We want to let them tell me. I don't have to analyze them. Even agreeing, praising and approving can be a barrier. Remember we talked about the affirmations, if it turns into too much. So we just have to be careful with those. Okay, I got 2 more I'm going to talk about. Withdrawing, we have to be careful with that too. Like we have to continue the engagement. It's our responsibility. Does that make sense? All right.
Sure. So from my perspective, I think if anybody had the ability to take something away from this, I would say it's really formulating reflections, because that is something that unfortunately for you all, you didn't get to experience, but during the live session, we were able to do some practice of being able to create reflections instead of questions, because that's a real challenge. Mm-hmm. It's something that we really struggle with, me in particular. Sometimes it's based upon confidence and just wanting to ask rather than make the assumption. But other times it's just our voice. So sometimes our voices will turn that lovely reflection into a question. And so then we no longer have that authentic piece where I'm understanding what you're saying to me. So if I could say one thing that I would hope that people would take is that reflection. And I made mention of this, I'm not sure if it actually came through in the recording or not, but the greatest place to practice that is with your children. I would constantly be practicing reflections, because it really does take that practice to start to feel confident that you're doing it well, and it's coming across as authentic and genuine like we'd like it to.
If I can just add and piggyback off of what Lori said, I also wanted to talk about where she mentioned several times that when you're using those motivational interviewing techniques, like the affirmations, like the reflections, like the summaries, just being careful not to use them too much, where you're beginning to sound like a little bit rehearsed or maybe not as sincere as you want to sound. So that was one of the things that I would say would be an important takeaway. Oh, do we have a question? Interpreters. Oh, that's a very good question. Let me see. Let me open it up. Do you have any suggestions for the use of interpreters and these techniques while working with non-English speakers? That's a very good question. I don't know if I have an answer for that one, Lord.
Yeah, I don't know if I do either. Motivational interviewing is an international organization. The Motivational Interviewing Network of Trainers is. And we've had this conversation about especially some of the complex reflective skills are almost, I don't want to say they can come across as sarcastic, but I think that might be close to it. Mm-hmm. In that when we're reflecting back, if it's not something that is culturally accepted or normal, that it can come across as not authentic, and it can actually really pull away from that relationship. So I think knowing the culture, mm-hmm. and any feel that you're able to get for what is truly an authentic conversation within that culture is going to be significantly important. As far as interpreters, I'm not exactly sure if anything would be really different other than just knowing the culture and making certain that you're utilizing the skills, reflections, even affirmations. Mm-hmm. Some cultures may really not accept affirmations the same way that we do in America. So some of those can come across as just odd, I would say. So I think any information you can gather of being culturally sensitive and having that awareness is going to prove to be most useful. I hope that answers the question. If not, please let me know what else you're looking for there.
Let's see the second question.
Yeah.
Are the MI trainers is recommended a certain ratio of clinicians be certified as trainers in-house or an agency? Well, as far as I know, you can do motivational interviewing without necessarily a certification or a specialized training, which is why, we're sharing this piece that anybody can do this. You can actually do this with your family and friends, which I do, and I'm sure Lori does. Techniques can be used at any time to help build that engagement and also move that conversation along. So that's more of what we're talking about.
And historically, there was no certification. And when I joined the Motivational Interviewing of Network of Trainers, there was no certification. We were just members. The certification process has actually started over the past year. And we had an acceptance to get into the organization that was created. So we had to do like a recording of a session with an individual. And then we had to actually score, if anybody's familiar, we had to use the Mighty and score our interactions. So we had to be able to meet the Mighty standards. And that's how you were able to become a member and go through what is their TOT, which actually is TNT, for motivational interviewing training to be an actual trainer, but you're still just a member. So now that the certification process has started, and I have not certified, I'm still just a member. There is an actual process, but there's, like Lynn said, motivational interviewing is like, cognitive behavioral therapy. It's a technique, it's a skill set that we can bring to our sessions.
Great. We do have one last question. It says, how long would you recommend the session to be to gather sufficient info for a CANS assessment?
Lynn?
I would say I wouldn't have a number. It just depends on that individual that you're working with. Many times you are constrained for time because maybe you have an hour session or maybe you have, another appointment afterwards. So without those things, to take into consideration, it's basically allowing for that space and time for that individual to really share their story. So you want to have that time be open. So I wouldn't say it's necessarily a structured time limit that's expected, and you may not get everything in one session. So that's another thing with the CANS assessment. You can always update those things if you don't get all the information that you wanted to gather in maybe the first, opportunity.
And I think it's important to remember that piece that it may take multiple sessions. And personally, I feel the healthier, the less traumatized an individual is, probably the longer it's going to take to gather some of that information. Because if you have healthy relationships, you don't reveal traumatic incidents within your first interaction or second interaction. So giving them the space to feel that you're there with them, that you're engaged with them, that you're present is going to certainly open up the opportunity to hear those stories.